Good afternoon. This week the House will return from a 2-week recess. Of note, the Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Bill was tabled today and will have its first reading on Thursday. This bill makes two very important changes to the Reserve Bank Act that will significantly improve monetary policy as it relates to its impact on New Zealanders and the real economy. The first change is to the objectives of monetary policy that will now require consideration of maximum sustainable employment alongside price stability when making monetary policy decisions and setting the official cash rate. This government believes inflation is not the sole issue facing our economy. Our monetary policy settings will work to support maximum employment for New Zealanders as much as keeping costs under control. We have been very successful at keeping inflation low while too many New Zealanders have lost their jobs. From now on, we aim to achieve better balance with high levels of employment and low inflation. The second change is the establishment of a monetary policy committee to make decisions on monetary policy and set the official cash rate. Previously, this has been the decision of the governor alone, but evidence suggests that committees make better decisions on average than individuals, including for monetary policy, because they include a range of perspectives and guard against extreme views or singular views that can hold our policy settings captive. The broader range of perspective will become especially important given the widening of the objectives of monetary policy to include employment. The Monetary Policy Committee will need to have people on it who are labour market experts who can provide advice on that new dimension to the policy settings. With regard to foreign affairs engagements, this evening I'll meet with the visiting delegation from French Polynesia, led by Edouard Fritsch, the President of French Polynesia. While on Tuesday evening I'll host a working dinner with the visiting Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister of Japan, Mr. Taro Aso, and his delegation. As you well know, Parliament resumes sitting this week and I'll attend question time on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Now today, Cabinet signed off an oral item appointing Dr Pauline Kingi, CNZM, to lead the inquiry into the appointment process of the Deputy Police Commissioner. Dr Kingi has an extensive 28-year career in the public service as both a community leader and senior public servant. She is a past counsellor for New Zealand Healthcare Standards, chair of the Auckland University of Technology, and Auckland Regional Director of Te Pone Kokiri. She was admitted as a barrister and solicitor in 1980, was a Harkness Fellow in 1983, and received a Master of Laws from Harvard University. The inquiry will commence on August 6th and report back within 6 weeks of establishment. The inquiry's purpose is to examine, identify and report on the adequacy of the process that led to the appointment of the Deputy Commissioner of Police. It will not look into the suitability of the appointment or the appointee for the role of Deputy Commissioner of Police. Any questions?
Will you be questioned during that inquiry?
I beg your pardon?
Will you be questioned at all? Do you expect members of the Cabinet to be questioned about the process?
Well, you'd have to ask the Dr Kingi, who has been given the role, and if she thought that was appropriate, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
So the selection panel sent 2 names for the Cabinet. Were you consulted before Stuart Nash decided on the one recommendation?
Well, Mr Nash didn't decide on the one recommendation. In the end, this matter came before Cabinet. And in the end, Cabinet carries the can on this, not just the Minister of Police.
Why did it take so long to establish the inquiry?
Well, it hasn't taken very long at all. It's been very expeditious, to be honest with you. We had to go through a number of people to find whether they were available. And in the end, we had to also consult with their view on the terms of the inquiry and other matters. And with the greatest disappointment, in the time we had available, it's been done.
Why will the terms of reference just be looking at the process and not at his suitability as a candidate?
Because the the correctness of the process will establish whether other questions arise from that. And suitability may be one of them. But it's the process that people are complaining about. The process has been called into question, and an inquiry to the process is what's happening now.
Would you expect Commissioner, the Police Commissioner and the former Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement to be examined by this inquiry?
I shouldn't enunciate my expectations because we've given someone the job with the terms of reference and with the promise that we are prepared to look at extension of time or look at resources if that becomes a question as to the quality of the inquiry. So that having been removed, I'd rather leave it over to Dr Kingi to decide rather than myself or my colleagues.
Just to clarify, you said that this matter came before Cabinet. Are you talking about not the inquiry, but the appointment of Wally Haumaha?
Well, in the end, these inquiries, the finality, go to the Cabinet Committee in the end.
No, but Wally Haumaha, his appointment came before Cabinet.
Yes.
Will the issue of whether any political disclosure about his former association with New Zealand First be subject of the inquiry?
Well, if it was part of the process, it may well do, but I'm not going to foreclose on Dr Kingi's means of going about finding the relevance of that question towards the process or whatever the conclusions might be.
How much
We
of this
haven't
inquiry?
got the terms of reference, so.
No, terms of reference were given out to you about 3 weeks ago, and also they'll be out in a press statement after this conference today.
How much will the inquiry cost?
Well, I can't give you that figure at the moment because we don't know the final cost when it's all over, but we should think it'll be something within $150,000. It might cost much less. Perhaps it might cost more depending on the request from the inquirer.
Is there any scope to look at the candidate's suitability outside of this particular inquiry if the inquiry is not going to look at that?
No, what the inquiry is going to look at is as to the appropriateness and the propriety of the process. And you would assume that if that is done, then the issue that you're talking about may well arise. But it's not for me or anyone to specify how Dr Kingi might go from the processes which he's on of inquiry to the issue of suitability. You'd expect, though, that the question you're asking would be answered after the first aspect has been properly looked into.
Could you just explain then what exactly you want to get out of this
Well,
inquiry?
usually the cart comes after the horse, not before.
So will she be able to make recommendations to, Tracy Martin, the cabinet, or, who?
Well, in the end, the recommendations would come to the cabinet.
Just on another issue, taxpayers are potentially in line to hand over millions of dollars in compensation to a disgraced US broadcasting host, Matt Lauer, for access to his Hunter Valley station down in Central Otago. Do you have any views on this? It seems like he's complied with all of the requirements of his lease that were negotiated with the OIO at the time, but...
Well, I do have views on it for a start. I mean, what on earth was the National Party doing in April last year of allowing that sort of sale in the way they did? Perhaps you could explain that to me. Why don't you ask them a few questions? Or Mr Bridges, when he turns up now and again, to give an account of himself.
So
It doesn't just stop with that. There's the field purchase or sale as well. It's one after the other. And now we're inheriting it and we've got to handle it. And it's complicated and I can't give you an answer because we don't know where it's going to at this point in time.
Is that on the basis of the good character test that he passed within the OIO application?
Well, I mean, that'll be the last aspect that should have been raised. But the reality is that they were selling it off to anyone offshore who had enough money to buy it or wanted to buy it. In an international market in a way that they should never have been, and which we will not allow now.
So even though obviously, it could potentially be the fault of negotiators at the time, the government and officials under the last government, do you think
It is, look.
taxpayers should still be liable for this?
Well, again, it's a further complication of what we've inherited. Doesn't stop, but this is a classic example. And having looked at what information is available at this point in time, including the latest news reports and other correspondence, I can't give you a conclusion as to where things go from here, because it's not within our purview or our control.
Is it your view that in future, in future such negotiations that, open access, unlimited access that's being sought in this case should be?
We do not envisage sales like this going on in the future. That's why the new government has changed the policy completely. I do not envisage selling this country out like the last government did.
Mr. Peters,
No.
Mr. Peters, can you give us an idea of what in particular you would like to speak about with the French, President of French Polynesia and the Deputy Prime Minister of Japan?
Very happy to. Very happy that they've reached out to be engaged with New Zealand in a way they never have in the past. I'm very pleased that they're a member of the Pacific Islands Forum. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got a reawakening in Polynesia of the French people themselves all the way to France. And so we're looking forward to very positive engagement, including discussions on Pacific agreement on closer economic relations and a whole host of things like that.
And what about the Deputy Prime Minister of Japan?
We're renewing a meeting that we began in Japan when I was last there, and he's passing through Auckland on his way back from South America, and he's stopping off for a working dinner.
So is there anything in particular that you want to talk to him about?
Yes, a lot, but I think I should tell him before I tell you.
Mr. Peters, have you seen the Got Beef campaign that Virgin Australia has launched?
Well, I've heard of it, but I mean, the Australians have a very interesting history when it comes to meat.
Do you think it's a good thing that they're encouraging New Zealand meat farmers to sell their wares across the Tasman?
Well, where's this question going?
Oh, you just had a bit to say when Air New Zealand took on the Impossible Burger. I guess this is a response to that.
Well, we're a country that is built on and survives on our agricultural exports. And if we undermine that, then it somewhat defeats the purpose of the country's long history of trying to sustain in an added value way to the top of its value our off-farm products.
Minister,
Your party has put out a media statement about this, congratulating Virgin Australia on its ad campaign. Is it a little bit odd that New Zealand First is backing an Australian airline over a New Zealand airline, you think?
Look, how can you extrapolate a congratulations because you're doing the right thing to saying we're backing some foreign airline?
Well,
And we were the ones who put the roux in the stew, you remember that one?
Minister, have you received a letter today from a bunch of Nauru refugees on the Australia issue?
No.
Have you seen the reports of that letter and read any?
I've seen the reports of the letter, but we have not got the letter.
What would be your response to that letter if you did?
Well, usually if you wanted to talk to a foreign government, you'd make sure you didn't talk to the media, but you gave it to the government itself.
They've sent the letter to you though, they sent the letter to you before they sent it to the media.
Well, with respect, no. The receipt of the letter is sending it. If it doesn't arrive, we will not get it.
It was sent by email.
Well, again, we have no reception of that.
Mr. Peters, various groups have come out today against the government's budget responsibility rules, saying that they're a bit too limiting. And I was wanting to get your perspective on that. Do you think that they're too limiting?
Well, you use the word rules, and I find that a misuse of the word, because frankly, whilst it's couched in that phrase, it's a question of the ratio of debt in a sound economy. Now, when you look at Germany, it'll be over 60%, and they've got a powerhouse of exports and manufacturing and the full modern economy. They would have the same equivalence of probably Tonga. One can pay its debt back, the other can't. So our question, and I'm sorry, our issue for the New Zealand government is to ensure that we have got enough aside for a rainy day of the type that we've seen already in terms of events, mycoplasma bovis, and the PSA with respect to two inherited problems that we as a government are now dealing with, and there may be others. So with caution that we are proceeding with this, and maybe 3 years down the track when we're on, and we've had 3 years to get on top of things, you may be right, but for the time being, I think it's premature to make that position, to make that stance.
So you say that in another 3 years' time, when the government is reassessing the budget responsibility rules, there is scope to lift that debt limit and change that spending limit as well?
Look, it's not what you do with debt. Sorry, it's not your debt, it's what you do with it. If your debt is for consumption, then you've got a problem. If it's for production, for the growth of the economy, to build new industries, then maybe it is a very sound answer. So any increased debt from here of that nature would have to be for not consumption, but for production and increased wealth creation. So it's a very complex question.
Mr. Peters, I just wondered if I could get your reaction to Donald Trump's latest threat to the Iranian president. Have you seen it?
I try not to follow personalities, whether they're in highly political places or journalists, who spend their time tweeting and tweaking.
He has said never ever threaten the United States again or suffer the consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. Does that concern you?
Well, you're reading out something that I haven't seen. No. I'm not going to come down here and respond to something that I haven't seen and just have them recited to me.
Do you believe me that he tweeted that?
Pardon?
Do you not believe me that he tweeted that?
Well, actually, no. As a lawyer, my job is to make sure that what I'm hearing is true before I respond.
I already can show you the tweet.
That's true.
Make the evidence.
With the greatest respect, that's still not evidence of a fact. I'm afraid you're a senior journalist.
Asking for a
How do I know he
tweet
put it out?
up there.
Sorry, Mr. Peters, can I just clarify, are you saying that Donald...
It's clear that a lot of Mr. Trump's tweets are not put out by him. That
Well-
must be surely obvious.
But
Well, how do you respond to his official Twitter account saying that?
Well, I don't.
you're saying that we don't know whether or not Donald Trump's tweets are real.
It sounds like him, and it probably is him, but I'm not going to come here at a press conference and start responding to it when I don't know it for a fact.
Do you send out all of your tweets?
Pardon?
Do you send out all of your tweets? And should
No.
people trust that
No, I
it's
don't.
coming from you when it's coming from your Twitter account?
No, with respect, I don't do that. I don't tweet.
I think the tweets, Mr. Peters, are about the stability of oil exports passing through the Gulf of Hormuz. The Iranians have said that if their oil exports are cut off entirely, they have it within their power to block the Straits of Hormuz.
That's not the first time that threat's been made. It's been made countless times in the past, possibly over the last 40 years.
Right, so there's not a concern in New Zealand about the stability of oil exports?
Well, of course we're seriously concerned. We're concerned that every comment and every act that would destabilise any part of the world, because in the end there can be consequences for our country. But there's only something that we can respond to in a valid way, other than just to make a comment
Is Mr.
of
Trump,
no value to the issue.
is President Trump's tweet a rational reaction for an American president?
Look, I'm not going to come here and spin a critique on the American president or any other leader for that matter. You write what you like anyway, so you go right ahead.
Do you back Andrew Little's criticism of Australia's deportation policies?
With respect, I was the one that said that they were outside the United Nations agreement which they'd signed.
So what about the good character test as opposed to the rights of the child? What do you think of their good character test?
Look, let me just make it very clear that if you're in a foreign country, you're expected to obey their laws. Now, this young
has
fellow,
nothing to do
this
with
young fellow
obeying
has been,
laws, though.
this young fellow has been released from the prison. In my view, as a consequence of our questioning the propriety of him being there, given that we're both signatories to the UN declaration on these matters. And now he's been let go back to his family in Sydney, and I do hope that he uses this opportunity to reconstruct his life. It's a serious problem.
But what do you think about the arbitrary removal of New Zealand residents from Australia without criminal charges or without a hearing?
Well, it's not the way the British law on which the Australian law was constructed, or our law either. should be a habeas corpus matter, and it's not being followed properly.
So you want to see that good character test in which the minister can decide.
No, but somebody should be tried before they're evicted from a country. At least they should be given a hearing as to whether or not what's about to happen is fair within the law of that host country.
Do you think Australia does all the heavy lifting with regard to policing the region for asylum seekers?
No, I don't. The fact that they are geographically placed where they are is a fact of geography. But to say that they are doing all the heavy lifting, given the reset and the amount of money and investment we're putting into helping our neighbourhood become a safer, more secure place, no, I do not agree with them at all.
So were you a bit upset when he basically called New Zealand a bludger in that regard?
Well, I don't go getting upset because, you know, in the end, foreign affairs is between peoples of different countries, not temporarily empowered political personalities. And we should never forget that.
Just going back to the Japan visit for a moment, in the light of the tit-for-tat trade war that seems to be developing between China and the United States, does that make Japan a more important potential market to us as a kind of a plan B?
Well, Japan has always been a very important market to us, and now much more important since the CPTPPA has been signed up to.
Right, but I was asking in the context of this tit-for-tat between China and our potential to be affected by the battling tariffs. Does that make a market like Japan seem more attractive to us?
Most definitely.
Can I just go back to President Trump's tweet? Do you have people and officials watching that Twitter account, or do you just ignore it completely?
If I thought my officials were watching this Twitter account, I'd have them fired. We've got far too much work to do.
Mr. Peters, you've been one of the strongest. You've been one of the strongest critics of the Reserve Bank for a number of years now. Now that we're seeing some of the legislation go through Parliament this week, I wonder if you could reflect on that legislation to think, does it go far enough, in your opinion, as New Zealand's first leader?
It's two parts, don't forget. And the second part's coming later than a year from now.
So the first part, do you think that it's gone far enough?
Well, it's a very happy compromise.
What do you
At
mean?
At least it's a start in the right direction.
What were the things that you had to be compromised on?
Look, I'm here speaking on behalf of the coalition government. That's what we've agreed on, and that's it.
Mr. Peters, of asset sales, would you be supportive of sale of Crown land to fund transport infrastructure?
In what circumstances?
If there was Crown land that was close to an infrastructure project that was sold to developers to develop that land because of increasing value, would you support that sale if the proceeds from that sale went into funding that infrastructure?
Well, that seems a seriously old-fashioned view of sound economics. So you put a railway in and you price the price of the land next to it that you might own, it goes rocketing up in value and you sell it for that purpose. That's what you're suggesting. That sounds like the economies of other countries where railways were in past times, even over 100 years ago.
So you'd be in favour of holding on to the land?
Yes, I am holding on. Well, if it makes sense. If you're holding on to land which, for no good reason, in the sense that it is a liability to you, it may be different.
Minister,
Peters,
Imperial
you've said-
Tobacco have commissioned a report into how much illicit tobacco is sold in New Zealand. They say 9% of tobacco sold in New Zealand is sold illicitly. So no excise taxes are coming in. The government's supposed to own about $180 million. They blame it on high excise taxes. Do you think there's a relationship between the excise taxes on tobacco and people going around and doing it illicitly?
Of course there is. I've always said there is. I've always questioned the integrity of the whole taxation system here. You know that the previous government promised smoke-free by 2025. Right now we're passing $2 billion in taxation on cigarettes and tobacco, and 3% of it is going for the minimisation of smoking, and the other 97% is going somewhere else. We all need to put our hands on our heart and say whether that's got any integrity, or it's fair or not. You couldn't be more precise. Of course it's leading to that, and it's leading to people being murdered and assaulted in our dairies.
So the taxes are too high, right?
No, I'm just giving you the facts. You decide whether it's too high or not.
Mr Peters, you've said before
All
that
I
you
do know is the money's not going for the purpose for which it's being collected in the first place.
Well, you're in a
Mr. Peters,
position
you've
to
said-
actually change that ratio.
Yeah, I know that, Audrey, but the fact is I said that a long time ago.
Well, but you weren't in government when you said it before, and now you've got the power to change it.
Yeah, I know, but we've also got the situation where we will be having to readjust the fiscals in our economy at the same time, and you can't do them all at once. You can't have every area of infrastructure, every area of education, health, policing, military, foreign affairs, all in deficit and fix it in one budget flat. Thank you very much.
Mr Peters, you've said, can I just ask you one more question?
You can't.